Hello and welcome back to Plumbob Diaries, where every sim has a story. My name is Tammy, and today I want to show you the mods that help me build the version of The Sims that I keep coming back to. Have you ever spent ages creating a sim, building a beautiful house, planning out this whole storyline in your head, only for 5 minutes later to find someone doing press-ups in the bathroom while their spouse flirts with a complete stranger? Because I have. And for the longest time, I genuinely thought that was just part of playing The Sims. But over the years, I've realised that it wasn't actually more content than I needed. It was better systems, better behaviours, and better storytelling tools. Little by little, I started changing the game, just enough that my Sims started behaving more like people and less, well, like Sims. So today I want to show you the mods that never leave my mods folder and how they've helped me build the version of The Sims that I keep wanting to come back to. Part 1. Making Sims behave like people. The first thing I wanted to fix wasn't relationships, money, or story progression. It was behaviour. Because no matter how beautiful your Sims are or how much effort you've put into their story, it's very difficult to stay immersed when they're constantly doing things that make absolutely no sense. And don't get me wrong, a bit of chaos is part of The Sims' charm, but there is a difference between chaos and your Sim leaving their own birthday party to make a white cake. One creator you'll hear me mention a lot is Sims For Me. Their mods aren't flashy, and that's exactly why I love them. Most of them are little tweaks that remove the kinds of behaviours that constantly pull me out of the immersion, like Sims checking their phone every 30 seconds, endless repetitive actions, or questionable autonomous decisions. The sort of things that remind you that you're playing a game instead of watching characters live their lives. I don't want to remove personality from my Sims, but I do want them to stop behaving like they've had 12 espressos and forgotten what they're doing. There are literally hundreds of Sims For Me mods covering everything from autonomy to weddings, wants and fears, townie behaviour and pack-specific fixes. But the ones I keep coming back to are the mods that make my Sims behave a little bit more like people. These are the kind of mods that you barely notice when they're installed, but you'd absolutely notice if they disappeared. LittleMsSam is another creator whose mods have become part of my game without me really thinking about it. A lot of them add options that simply make sense. For example, children being able to ride horses. If you've watched my ranch series, Return to the Ridge, you'd know that would be a bit of a problem otherwise. Or things like adults being able to cleanse their face instead of skincare becoming something you forgot how to do when you turned 18. They're small changes, but they help the world feel more consistent and believable. One of my favourite examples is having more calendar activities. It might sound like a small thing, but it helps the year feel fuller and gives my Sims more reasons to gather together. If you've watched any of my series, you'll know that I'm slightly obsessed with creating traditions, community events, clubs, and all of those little moments that make the world feel lived in. Honestly, a lot of the stories in that save file start with something that was already in the calendar. And actually, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video on my calendar and club system, because it's probably one of the biggest things that makes my rotational save file feel alive. Carl's Try to Make Friends might be one of my favourite quality of life mods in this entire video. It solves a problem that's always bothered me in The Sims. How much clicking is involved just maintaining a conversation. Instead of constantly opening up the social pie menu and queuing interaction after interaction, I can put a Sim on autopilot and let them focus on making friends. So, for example, while my child Sim is making a friend on the playground, I can focus on mum, the baby, the dog, the horse, or whatever other chaos is happening somewhere else. It sounds simple, but it makes social interactions feel much more natural and frees me up to focus on the rest of the story. Kuttoe's random text is one of those mods that's easy to overlook, but it does something really important. It makes the people in my Sims' lives feel like actual people. For example, friends check in, parents call to see how they're doing, romantic partners send messages, and occasionally someone decides to ring up and try and scam them out of money. But what I really love is that these interactions aren't generic. The calls and texts are influenced by personality traits and relationships, so different Sims have different things to say. A geek might want to talk about a new game, a bro might call about sports, an erratic Sim might call about something completely bizarre, and my Sims don't react all the same way either. It's a small detail, but it makes all the difference to my save file. Taken individually, none of these mods are particularly dramatic, but together they let me spend less time micromanaging my Sims and more time focusing on their stories, and for me, that's a win. Of course, getting Sims to behave more naturally is only part of the story. The next thing I wanted was for their relationships to feel a little bit less predictable. Part 2. Making relationships matter. Once my Sims started behaving a little bit more naturally, the next thing I wanted to tackle was relationships, because for me, that's where most stories live. The problem was, after a while, I realised that a lot of relationships in The Sims felt too similar. Whether two Sims had just met or been together for years, they often followed the same path, and that's not really how people work. Some people click instantly, some people take time, some people are a complete disaster from the start. And that's so much more interesting. Wonderful Whims is probably the biggest reason my Sims don't fall in love with the first person they talk to. It adds attraction, compatibility, preferences, and personality into the equation, which means there's a little bit of uncertainty. Sometimes the person I had in mind for a story isn't the person my Sim is interested in at all. And while that can be mildly inconvenient when you've got a plan, I also think that's where some of the best stories come in. Personally, I use wonderful Whims rather than wicked Whims because it gives me all of that relationship depth while still fitting the style of gameplay that I enjoy. If Wonderful Whims helps decide how relationships begin, then Relationship and Pregnancy Overhaul is what helps them to grow and evolve. For me, relationships are more interesting when they have consequences. Conversations matter, choices matter, pregnancies feel more considered, and relationships stop feeling like they're something you're trying to complete as quickly as possible. I don't think every story needs conflict, but I do think every story benefits from having something at stake. And that's what RPO brings to my game. The final mod in this section is Basemental. Now, for the most part, I use this quite lightly. In my ranch theme series, Return to the Ridge, it's mainly there because when my Sims order a beer or a cocktail, I want those drinks to be alcoholic. It's a small detail, but it helps social events feel a little bit more believable. What I like though is that this mod can also go much deeper when a story calls for it. If you've watched my Family Fortunes mini drama series, you'll know that Lila vapes and struggles with substance use, while Eddie has a gambling addiction. Those weren't random traits I decided to give them. They become part of who those characters were and the challenges they were facing. And I think that's where these mods are at their best. Not when they're adding features for the sake of it, but when they're helping you tell the story that's already there. Taken together, these mods make relationships feel less predictable, and that's important because relationships are where so many Sim stories begin. Sometimes they become friendships, sometimes they become marriages, and sometimes they become absolute train wrecks. And honestly, I like not knowing which one it's going to be. Part 3. Taking control of the story. The next thing I realised was that even with better behaviours and more meaningful relationships, I was still spending a lot of time fighting the game. Sometimes I know exactly what story I want to tell. Other times, the Sims surprise me, and those become some of my best moments. But either way, I don't want to spend half an hour setting something up, only for the game to get in its own way. These are the mods that I use when I want to spend less time wrestling with the menus and more time actually telling the story. The backbone of all of that is MC Command Center. Honestly, I don't think it's possible to talk about storytelling mods without mentioning it. It handles everything from story progression to population management, and it gives me control of how the wider world develops around my Sims. Honestly, there are so many features packed into MC Command Center that I still discover things I didn't know it could do. MC Command Center is such a huge part of how I play that it really deserves a video of its own. In fact, that's something I'm currently working on, so if it's already live by the time you're watching this, I'll link it in the description below. But if I had to choose one mod that completely changed how I play The Sims, it would definitely be MC Command Center. A close second is UI cheats, and I know some people think of this as a cheat mod, which is fair because it's right there in the name. But honestly, I use it more as a storytelling tool. Sometimes I don't want to spend 20 minutes solving a problem that has nothing to do with the story I'm trying to tell. UI Cheats lets me fix those little issues and move on. Control Any Sim is one of those mods that becomes more useful the larger your stories get. If I'm filming a family gathering, a wedding, a birthday, or one of my Family Friday events, there are often lots of Sims involved, and usually at least one of them has decided it's now the perfect time to leave. And sometimes I just need to sit somebody down, or stop walking away, or join a conversation that they're supposed to be having. Without this mod, I'd be constantly switching and breaking out of the flow of what I'm trying to do. With it, I can keep everything moving and focus on the story in hand. More recently, I've also started using Lumpinou's Do Something mod. And what I like about this one is how quick it is. Control Any Sim is fantastic when I need full control, but sometimes I don't need full control. I just need the sim to stop doing something ridiculous or start doing something they're supposed to be doing. And that lets me do this almost instantly. It's one of those small quality of life mods that doesn't sound particularly exciting on paper, but when you're setting up scenes and telling stories, it saves a surprising amount of time. The funny thing is, I don't actually use these mods to control every part of the story. If you've watched my series, you'll know that some of my favourite moments are the ones I never planned. What these mods really give me is freedom. They remove the little frustrations, reduce the amount of setup, and let me spend more time focusing on the characters. And honestly, that's usually where some of the best stories happen. Part 4. Making the world feel alive. Up until now, we've mostly been talking about how the Sims behave, but the final piece of the puzzle is the world itself. Because even with great Sims and great stories, I still want the save file to feel lived in. I want it to feel like a place my Sims actually exist in, rather than just a collection of lots and loading screens. One of my favourite characters for storytelling is Utopia. What I love about their work is the way that it adds personality to everyday life. The interactions themselves are lovely, but what I enjoy most is how they help different Sims feel different from one another. Ava, for example, would absolutely be carrying a glamorous handbag everywhere she goes because it fits who she is, whereas May is much more likely to be found on a bike ride with her husband Owen. Neither interaction is particularly dramatic, but they tell you something about those characters. They help my Sims express who they are in ways that go beyond traits and aspirations, and they create opportunities for relationships to develop through their shared experiences rather than just conversations. And when you're telling stories, those little details matter. They're the moments that fill the space between the weddings, birthdays, and major plot twists. If Utopia gives my Sims more ways to express their personalities, then Kuttoe helps those moments feel more believable. If you've seen my video on my favourite overrides, you'll already know that I'm a little bit obsessed with these. The reason I love Kuttoe's work isn't because it adds huge features or dramatic gameplay changes, it's because it improves the moments that already exist. When my Sim reads a book, lounges on a bed, uses a laptop, chats with a friend, or eats dinner with their family, it looks more like something a real person might actually do. These are the things our Sims do every day, and Kuttoe makes those moments feel more natural, comfortable, and believable. A lot of storytelling happens in those quieter moments between the big events, and for me, that's where these overrides really shine. They're subtle, but they add personality, warmth, and realism to everyday life in a way that I absolutely love. Another small change that makes a surprisingly big difference for me was removing the Plumbob. Previously, I used the cheat to remove the headline effects, but I missed the game's information, things like speech bubbles and skill progress. This mod just removes the Plumbob floating above your Sim's head. All the other headline effects are still there. And once I got used to it, I found it much easier to focus on the Sims themselves rather than the game mechanics sitting on top of them. The final thing I'll mention isn't really a mod at all. It's using cinematic camera tools, tab mode, and a few simple filming tricks to see the game from your Sim's perspective. In fact, I've already made an entire video of how I use the cinematic camera, so if you'd like a deeper dive into that, I'll leave it linked below. When I started spending more time viewing the world through my Sim's eyes rather than from above, it completely changed how connected I felt to the stories I was telling. And when you combine that with everything that we've talked about today, better behaviours, deeper relationships, more storytelling control, and a world that feels lived in, you end up with something that feels very different from the default game. Not necessarily better, just more personal. So if you've ever found yourself thinking, I wish my Sims would just, then hopefully some of these ideas have given you a few places to start. Because for me, realism isn't about making the Sims harder, it's about making the Sims feel believable, about creating a world that feels lived in. And these are the tools that help me build the version of the Sims that I keep coming back to. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.